Hi, everybody, and welcome to EDSE 672, Session 1. We're looking at models of leadership. So as you're reviewing your assigned texts and looking through this PowerPoint, I just wanted to provide a supplemental video lecture for you so that we can really be working through this information together and so that I can provide some clarification about some of these topics. This is a lengthy presentation, so we're not going to hit in depth on every single topic, but what we will do is talk through main ideas. And then if you have any specific questions, please feel free to forward them to me. Best way to reach me is via email, or you can reach me through Canvas messaging. So looking forward to going through these with you. We'll begin here on the first slide. What we're looking at in this conversation really is values in leadership to begin. We're thinking about what is a leader. So to introduce these topics, we want to think about the great men theory. Obviously, this could involve female or male leaders, leaders of any gender, but taking a look at something that comes from the 19th century, it was at that time entitled the great man theory. And great man theory basically states that significant or influential people are the ones who make a decisive or a major historical impact. So the idea of this theory is that a great person, quote unquote, or a great leader is going to be the one who can make those moves, make those changes in society, in culture, and over time in history. Taking a look at power or position. So on our reflection for this session, our first submission for the intro assignment, I've had several people reach out to me and say, I don't know how to write about my leadership experience because I'm not a principal or a dean or an assistant principal. I'm a teacher or, even I'm a classified staff member. I don't have any leadership opportunities. And my response has been absolutely you do. So taking a look at this slide, we really see that courage, commitment, and skill, these are the things that create a leader. So developing expertise in whatever it is that you do for work. Looking at leadership through a more broad lens, understanding that a leader can be a leader with students, a leader with colleagues, staff who are perhaps at the same level, working at the same level, and even a leader with administration. A formal leadership position doesn't mean that you cannot learn from those in all positions within a building or a district. So please be aware that we can take leadership opportunities throughout our work, regardless of position. This is definitely something that we can work on for thinking outside the box about what leadership truly is. But another point made in this slide is that leadership is not value free, and that a leader is somebody who significantly influences a large group of people. So the example is provided of Pablo Escobar, who was a significant leader in a drug cartel, and he lived from 1949 to 1993. So even in a relatively short lifespan, Escobar made significant impact and a significant difference. Now, we may say that this was not a positive difference overall because of some of the issues with this drug cartel and the safety issues and drug issues, but we recognize that he had a significant influence. So the main idea of that example is that a leader can lead for good or in a negative direction. You need to recognize both of those possibilities and also anywhere in between. As for values in leadership, as leaders, and as I mentioned, we all have opportunities to lead in our current positions and in our communities. Leadership is influence, so the impact that we can have on others, as well as our formal position. But recognize that impact is not directly related to our station or our formal position. We have choice to lead in a positive direction or in a misleading, is what this term would be, a negative direction. So recognize that leadership is really the opportunity to mobilize people to tackle tough problems. We're always going to be encountering challenges, problems, and issues within school settings, regardless of our role. And so working with other people to support them in attacking these tough problems and tackling them, that is true leadership. In addition to this, we want to consider adaptive work. So remember, the evolution or changing of a species as the surrounding environments, genetic changes are occurring. We're always adapting to keep ourselves safe and to grow and to have more efficiency in the way that we live. And this is also true for culture and for, in this context, a building, a school culture and climate, district culture and climate. We want to think about changing, constantly changing, as we know that our work settings are constantly changing. What are we trying to become and why? So leadership is not static. It's something that has to be flexible and it has to be malleable based on the new variables that are introduced in our settings and the challenges that may arise along the way that can be very unpredictable. We also want to consider authority, the idea of authority. Influence doesn't necessarily have to come with authority. So just as we've discussed, leadership can come out in any role. It can be a strong opportunity in any role, but influence doesn't necessarily come with authority just because somebody has a particular title. Another important component of being an effective leader is to assess reality, clarify values. Where are we and where do we want to go? So always looking at the gap in between and planning, making steps about how to get there. Thinking about adaptive work, and again, adaptive work, this is the idea of adapting to our surroundings and changing values, beliefs, or behaviors as needed in order to effectively lead. It has a lot to do as well with cultural intelligence and understanding how to work effectively with diverse people, groups of people, and diverse, settings and opportunities. So in times of stress, we would turn to authority or a person in leadership for several different things: direction, protection, order, and different teams in a time of crisis would have different purposes. So, a particular leadership team or an individual might be working on problem solving, another might be more strategic or tactical, and another might be creative, really trying to think outside the box. Recognizing the importance of all these roles is essential in developing strong leadership. We have several examples for application in this PowerPoint, which are not all directly related to education. But we want to just remember that power can be applied in a variety of contexts. So we have examples from environmental protection. We've got examples here, medical care, thinking about the direction or leadership of a surgeon, a physician, versus a nurse or a nurse's attendant. All of these individuals have opportunities to be leaders when they're serving patients, when they're serving one another, when they're serving a supervisor, and throughout, the shift at work each day, opportunities are presented. Very important to think about pace of change as well. If you're within a classroom, a school, or a district and trying to implement a change, there's a lot of trust that has to be developed that people can have in a leader. We want to think about going too slowly. If we're changing too slowly, we may appear incompetent, but if we move too fast, there'll be crisis. It'll cause an enormous amount of stress, and you as a leader might be blamed for the problems that are occurring. So we want to consider these principles. Easy way out always leads back in. So taking the easy way is not going to benefit us in the end. A leap of abstraction has to deal with jumping to conclusions. So we're thinking about taking a look at data and saying, well, I know exactly why this is. Jumping there without really looking at other factors and generalizing the results if we're looking at data or looking at a problem. And this can be very problematic when we develop complex interventions based on a leap of abstraction. We're always looking at balancing that inquiry, advocacy, integrating both of those components in our leadership, and also looking at what we say versus what we do. So theories and use, that's our action, that's what we're doing, and espouse theories are what we say. So we want to make sure that those line up. We have a couple political examples here from history in the United States, and you can, dive into those and research them by yourself. But it's really important to think about, these particular leaders and maybe strengths, maybe things they could have done differently, but making all of those considerations. We want to think about how leadership and authority are different. It's essential for people to exercise leadership even if they don't have a station or role that is a formal authority station. So again, all individuals rising up as leaders and taking those opportunities, thinking about how we can do that in our present roles, even if we are not administrators or school or district level leaders. Think about, some other examples of leadership within a family, thinking about political leadership. And so there are some more examples in this PowerPoint of what's worked, what hasn't, and whether people are leading traditionally or mixing up the game a little bit. So definitely take those into consideration. We also want to think about how squeaky wheel gets the grease, basically, is how I would summarize this particular slide. Definitely attracting and directing attention. So using your voice as a leader to advocate and say, I'm concerned about this problem. The idea of a holding environment is an environment that includes trust and cohesive cooperation. This is essential for the change, the adaptive change that we're talking about, to occur. We're thinking about creative versus emotional tension as well. Emotional tension I would describe as stress regarding trying to meet a goal. Maybe we're worried about the finances or the reaction of people. But the creative tension is really wanting to get there, having a vision and wanting to achieve it. So we know that if the emotional tension overtakes the creative tension and wins out, that the change is not going to happen. So we need to be aware of that possibility and mindful of it. Also remember, leaders are always, quote unquote, failing someone. And the main idea there is that you're not always going to be liked by everyone as a leader, especially if you're working on, adaptive work, adaptive leadership, and making most changes. We're also going to hit on the difference between technical problems and adaptive challenges, and this wording is different. You'll see in slides below. Technical problems, looking much more at the system that's already in place, things based in logic, quick fixes, and adaptive challenges are really related to systemic change and always improving and growing. So here's a little visual to provide those examples for you. In technical work, in leadership, it's clear, the problem is clear, solutions are clear, authority will take care of it. But if the type of work that we're doing is both technical and adaptive, the problem might be clear, but the solutions will require learning. And authorities as well as stakeholders in this setting would be community members, parents and families, students, educators, classified staff, really any person involved, and a person who's experiencing the problem would be a stakeholder. Recognize as well that in adaptive work, learning is required to identify and understand the problem as well as the solution. And sometimes the influence of the stakeholder can be, even greater or more important to take into consideration than just the thoughts or opinions of the formalized authority. So recognize that community approach, that cohesive approach, which we refer to as a holding environment. And as another review here, adaptive work would be looking at aspirations versus reality, narrowing that gap, and doing so through a process of learning. This is very collaborative. What do we need to keep? What is essential versus non-essential? There definitely may be loss involved, definitely progressive work as well. We can think about always that balance, not too quickly, not too slowly. Action research is something that comes to mind when we're considering this adaptive work. It's coming from within, and the people who are impacted can participate and be a part of and even facilitate and mobilize that solution. Recognize that adaptive work can take time. It's experimental. It's a lot of troubleshooting. Definitely can shake things up. We're thinking about disequilibrium here, and even people wanting to avoid the work because change can cause some anxiety. So it's important for a leader to be aware of that. Finally, we want to think about leadership with authority. So we're looking at the different components of technical leadership and change versus adaptive. And this is a slide that you can review. We'll now begin part 2 of this video lecture in the next video.